I am deeply honored to take part in today's celebration for the presentation of the Primo Levi Award to Professor Jean-Marie Laine. First of all, I am honored because of the great personality of the award winner. Then, as president of the International Primo Levi Studies Center, I see that occasion as an opportunity to go forward in our studies and our thinking in order to strengthen the structures of the initiative that we are all contributing to with renewed conviction. Together with our center, the German and the Italian chemical societies cooperate periodically and in identifying the best candidate on whom to confer a public recognition in the name of Primo Levi. At the same time, in my opinion, the Primo Levi Center must get to know how to offer a richer and richer contribution to the ways through which Levi, in his life and his works, tried to weave scientific knowledge and practice in with a broader vision of the lives of human beings. Levi had an extremely varied relationship with science and particularly with chemistry. According to a recent text by the English scholar Robert Gordon, a professor at the University of Cambridge, there are at least 5 figures of persons of science that circulate in Levi's literature. Here we can point out books where Levi deals with this topic more specifically, such as the periodic table, other people's trades, and the search for roots. We can also include his collection of science fiction and fantasy biology, which contain many explicit critical allusions and passages of scathing irony. Hence, Gordon first writes of Levi as a rationalist who weighs and divides, measures and judges on the basis of certain proofs, and strives to give answers to the questions why. He writes secondly of Levi, the naturalist and anthropologist, who is curious by definition, for whom the aim of science is not so much the deduction of hypotheses and models as much as the observation of phenomena and that are natural, be they mineral, vegetable, or animal of any kind, including human. Third, there is also Levi, the technician, the haunter of laboratories, an industrial chemist who worked to solve everyday scientific problems. Fourth, there is the figure of the managerial bureaucratic scientist, Levi as a company man of the 1960s and 1970s who had already left the laboratory. Finally, there is a fifth figure that is very present as much in Levi's life and in his works, tied in with an idea of science rooted in wonder, and pervaded with the romantic scientist spirit of adventure and desire for discovery. According to Gordon, this figure of wonder is the key for a more complete interpretation of the hybrid nature of Levi, the writer, scientist, witness. At this point, wonder seems to impose itself as the bridge between science and literature. There is not enough time now to go deeper into this topic, but it is enough to say that these figures stand out even more, and even more so the figure of wonder, if we look at them in the light of the perversion of science that the Nazis committed and that Primo Levi already experienced in person in the years of his education during fascism and later in the concentration camp. We should focus on this further in order to outline the connections between the manipulation of knowledge that Levi clearly perceived when he was a young student at the Liceo d'Azeglio in Turin on the one hand, and the horrors of Auschwitz on the other. Here, I am referring to the method of technological extermination, to the so-called medical experiments inflicted to the deportees, and to the less obvious forms of the subjugation of science to power during the years of Hitler and other totalitarian systems. Rather, it is precisely in this environment that the ambiguity of human behavior is most unsettling and hardest to uncover. Therefore, this ambiguity consists in science in its development in, let us say, normal times, together with science seen and represented in the upside-down mirror of the concentration camp. At this point, a primary line of research in Levi's works should be able to lead us to draw a border between the varying degrees of manipulation and perversion of scientific knowledge on all occasions, harbingers of grave risks for the present and the future, and their use aimed instead at the improvement of the conditions of human beings and the environment of their lives. There is then a second line of our research that is no less important. Science calls for a practical commitment on the part of those who wish to learn it, as well as a specific educational effort. It calls for the acquisition of specialistic skills that are often distant from the experience of most people. As Levi seems to suggest, science in its practice and in its concrete after effects does not go on in a sphere that is completely separate. Its border with life has never been very clear. Like all of us, a scientist is a woman or man who has never stopped being her or himself as much in daily life as in scientific work. This is the reason why the ethical dimension is intrinsically rooted in the concrete experience of science and of those that practice it, and why an award like ours is so important.